Okay, so we're live now. The eagle-eyed of you will notice that we have a guest panelist, the one and only Professor Marc Bekoff. But before we go into all of that, I've got a special announcement, and I just want to make sure that the technology works. It might be a bit glitchy, I'm afraid, from the point of view of the sounds, but try and bear with that, folks. So here we go.
Hang down your head, Tom Dooley. Hang down your head and cry. Hang down your head, Tom Dooley. Tommy, can you see me? Can I help to cheer you? Ooh, Tommy, Tommy, Tom, turn around, don't ever let me down, don't ever leave my life. Tom, turn around, don't ever let me down, you don't need ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom.
He's back, folks. He's back.
He's back. Hey. We have to explain to Marc what that was all about, because Marc's been thinking, who are these people?
Yeah.
What am I doing on this show?
That was great. My cousin played Mean Uncle Ernie in Tommy the Who on Broadway in New York.
Oh.
That's great.
Oh, you mean the pervert? Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh.
So Tom left us last week, Marc, and he was taking a little break from the show, but he's back. So hence the little welcome back for our Tom.
back sooner than expected, but pleased to be back with you.
Welcome back. Welcome back, Major Tom.
Thank you.
Oh, so shall I get on with the intro now?
Yes.
So as you can see, we have a special guest panelist, Marc Bekoff. I hope I'm saying that right, Marc. Is it Bekoff? So Marc is Professor Emeritus of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology at the University of Colorado in Boulder. He's published, believe it or not, 31 books. He's won many awards for his research on animal behavior, animal emotions, otherwise known as cognitive ethology, compassionate conservation, and animal protection. And he's worked closely with Jane Goodall and is a former Guggenheim Fellow. And he also works closely with inmates at the Boulder County Jail. So in this show, we're going to be exploring how compassionate conservation and the science of animal well-being and animal rights philosophy all share a fundamental principle that we need to respect all individual animals' lives. So we're going to look at Marc's extensive experiences in animal protection and his vast research into the emotional lives of other animals and how that has led him to see the importance of humane education, honouring sentience, and why it's necessary to move away from more animal welfarism and traditional conservation. So welcome, Marc, and thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And thanks for clarifying your name. So it's Bekoff, not Bekoff. I've been saying your name wrong for years, Marc. I'm sorry about that.
Everyone says that, don't they, as well? Bekoff.
I know who I am.
I know that must be really frustrating.
Not always. No, it's fine.
So I'm just going to read out some of the hellos from the folks in the chat. Hello to Jonah, Vegmet, Codbod, Amber, Deb, Jennifer, hello Louisa, random username 248, hi there. Bernie Brannock, hello to Rama, hello to Maria, hello to Declan from Vegan Education on the Go, I believe. Hi Ronnie, Race, hello Vegan Gays, Icy Turner, is it still going? Yes, we're back again. And Vegan something says hello.
Vegan something, is that a title?
Something.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Hello to Louise Patterson and Reluctant Warrior as well, who has one of your books, Marc's. Yeah. And Deb says your books are amazing.
You see this came in 7 hours ago. This is getting ahead of the game. So talking about most fascinating are the psychological elements. So Critter Club on YouTube. I don't know if anybody knows that. Are you aware of that, Mark?
What's that?
A thing on YouTube called Critter Club with a K. Critter Club.
Nope, don't know it.
No. Okay. Right. Well. Okay. So Nella.
Yeah, we have a lot to cover today. So I have a question for you. You've written extensively about animal morality, and if I'm not mistaken, you have defined morality as a wide spectrum of behaviors that share the common feature of care about the welfare of others. And you've also said that human and non-human morality differ in degrees and not in kind. So having this in mind, I'm wondering if we should challenge the moral agent, moral patient dichotomy that philosophers usually use. Is it useful? Is it harmful? Because I'm thinking that if I view other animals as moral agents, then I may run the risk of anthropomorphizing too much and judge them by my own moral standards. And if I view them as a moral patient, I rob them of their agency. So should we move away from all this way of thinking?
Well, I'm not a philosopher. I mean, I think I find the use of the phrases moral patients and moral agents to be interesting, but I don't use them very often because most people have no idea what that means. So if you're trying to reach academics, you can use those phrases and then beat them to death. And depending on what side of the coin you're on, you can decide that non-humans, have no morality, because you can define away non-humans from a lot of different cognitive and emotional capacities by just saying they don't have it and go from there. And I frankly just don't use those terms. You raise the idea about, or the concept of anthropomorphism, and I no longer really talk or write about that anymore, just because it's just one of those divisive tools where we say, well, we're attributing human characteristics to non-humans, and then once again, depending on how you're coming at it, you can just define away non-humans by saying, oh, you're just being anthropomorphic. I mean, people do that. So in my view, you need to use terms in the language with which you're the most familiar, and just talk about humans and non-humans using those terms. The same with the word morality. People will, write volumes about morality. I boil it down in a very simple way that non-humans know right from wrong, as do humans, and sometimes they violate those codes. The idea of, the differences in morality, if you will, being differences in degree rather than differences in kind, comes from Darwin's work, where he wrote about the differences in a lot of capacities, emotional and cognitive, between non-humans and humans, are differences in degree rather than differences in kind, meaning, simply that we're not separating humans here, non-humans here, with some kind of impenetrable barrier. So is dog morality the same as human morality? I don't know, and I'm not sure it really matters. Is dog morality the same as chimpanzee or rat or mouse morality? I don't know. But now, we're reading a lot about rodents taking care of other rodents who are in pain or suffering, and knowing what to do to reduce that pain or suffering. So I cash that out as saying they know the difference between right and wrong. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I'm really practical minded that we should be applying what we know to protect other animals. So in the United States, rats and mice, among other animals, have been defined out of the Federal Animal Welfare Act as not being animals. And people are astounded by that, because people can just beat it to a pulp But of course, rats and mice are animals, and of course, they show what I would simply call empathy, compassion, dignity, respect, and concern for the suffering and well-being of other animals. I guess I've sort of beaten it to death too, but yeah.
Mark, I listened back to the podcast that we did together, and I was quite shocked to find out that it was 9 years ago. And you said that a phrase that I wrote back down was, if we have something, then other animals have it too. I think that, to kind of engage Nella's point, though, people would still try to create a hierarchy, wouldn't they? They say, yeah, but we've got more of it.
Yeah.
But then you would answer that by going, yeah, but we don't understand theirs. So how can we know that we have more of it?
Right. And we don't understand ours. I mean, there's, as far as I know, there's no non-human who's as violent and repulsive as humans to members of their own or other species. I mean, it's very simple. And you can, one of the examples people use about moral behavior and right and wrong is predatory behavior. But I mean, unfortunately, there are predators. I mean, if evolution worked a different way, you wouldn't have predators and prey, for example. Predators have to eat and survive, and they can't go to the local deli or local food store market and buy their food. So I don't consider that to be an example of moral behavior. I mean, especially as in when you look at trophy hunting in humans, if you will, non-sustainable hunting. So humans go to the far ends of the earth to justify, or some humans, sustainable hunting or hunting for food. Well, that's exactly what predators do. So that's the way it is.
I saw you did an article about that today, I think, Mark, about trophy hunting and how that kind of creates division within the hunting community itself, the ones who see themselves as doing it for food reasons, as it were.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was actually posting an article, I think, from The Guardian about that. But yeah, I mean, I don't like hunting. I mean, I'm not a hunter. And I know people who hunt or who are awfully nice people, but I always tell them I don't want to be on the receiving end of their rifle. But people who do go out and hunt, whether you like it or not, for food and, say for food and clothing, most of them abhor trophy hunting. I mean, trophy hunting is just killing for fun. It's killing for sport. And there's evidence that if you look at the facial expressions of a lot of trophy hunters, particularly men, although women are hitting the scene too, they enjoy doing it. They like bragging. I won't go into the more phallic discussions of trophy hunting, but really, most hunters just really don't like trophy hunting. They think it's cruel. They think it's unnecessary. And of course, some of them think it just casts a bad light on them who go hunt for food. Yeah.
Getting a lot of praise for your books here, Mark. Your books are amazing. So that's nice.
Wow.
Thanks for that, Deb.
Thank you.
I've got a question.
Yeah,
I just wanted to ask Mark if he ever sleeps. He does so much, writes so much. Like I think, have you not written like 1,300 articles for Psychology Today, Mark, or something like that?
Yeah, I've written a lot of them. I do sleep. I mean, in fact, in this other interview I was doing, they were talking about patterns, and my pattern is I play hard, I rest hard, and I work hard, and I really step away from my work. I mean, I ride my bike, I love sitting and doing nothing, but I think it's just a genetic aspect of my family that most of us, if we get 6 good hours of sleep, then we're fine.
Do you cycle fast, do you, Mark? Do you?
Oh, no, cycling training is very varied. I mean, I'll go out on 2 or 3 hour really easy rides, just pedal around, keep your heart rate down. And then like yesterday, we did a 5 hour, fairly exhausting gravel ride. And I got back and I ate my pasta. I drank some wine. I drank far too many beers, and I ate a lot of potato chips. But so people ask me that. I mean, I'm really efficient. I don't sit at my computer and do nothing. I mean, when I work hard, and when I play hard. But I think it's the rest that's important. You know, right before we were talking, I was doing another interview, it was a written interview. But sometimes just step away, close off the world, and do nothing. And I mean just nothing, and I love those times. But anyway.
Mm-hmm. Actually, one thing that I was saying to the team just before we came on, I think before you came on as well, Mark, is that I know a lot of your work, you're really, you know, you've studied other animals out in the field. You've written extensively on their emotional lives, their behavior, and things like this. And one thing that always astounds me is how shocked humans are at these discoveries that we make, or we learn about other animals having funerals, for example, or how they, you know, how they grieve, or how they have relationships, or how they form these bonds. And we're always quite amazed and shocked by these things. But I think for me, I find it shocking that we assume that they don't have these emotional lives and that they don't have these behaviors. It's like we've really separated ourselves out so much from other animals as humans. We've created that divide so hugely that we can't see that they're possibly anything like us in an emotional way. And why do you think that might be? Have you had experience of, or I'm sure you've had a lot of time to think about these things. Have you got any theories as to why that might be?
Well, a lot of people just don't have the opportunity to keep up with what we've learned in the last 100 years on the cognitive and emotional lives of animals. That's not a criticism. They're just busy. They're trying to make life, do well in life. Another, of course, is a lot of my scientific colleagues are, you know, I call them homo denialists. They just deny things because then it allows them to go kill animals and slaughter them and harm them and do whatever they want to do. So it's easy to just deny that. It's funny that you mentioned that because I've been writing some stuff along those lines where I do field work, and I've studied coyotes in the field and penguins in Antarctica and some work on wolves and red foxes. And people in wildlife management in the United States, but also worldwide, say, show us the data. And you show them the data, but they don't really want the data. So you keep showing them the data on recent advances in cognitive ethology. And they'll keep saying, show us the data. And they're just out of touch. And I think the most important being with whom they're out of touch is themselves. I mean, you'll say to them, oh, do you live with a dog? Uh-huh. Does your dog like to play? Uh-huh. Do you think your dog misses you? Uh-huh. When somebody passes away or disappears, because I don't know what the dog knows about dying and death, do they miss you? Uh-huh. And I'll go, oh, well, what about cows and sheep and pigs? What about animals in zoos? Oh, we don't know. And as a biologist, I always say, well, humans are mammals. I mean, humans are animals. There's human animals, non-human animals. You know, there's a whole group of mammals. We have the same brains. We have the same neurotransmitters. And so why would you attribute these deep and rich emotions, say, to your companion animals, dogs or cats or others, but not to other animals? So they deny it because it opens the door to being able to rationalize and justify horrific treatment of other animals. And I have no idea how they sleep at night. I mean, it's got
great utility, hasn't it? You know, this divide. You mentioned cognitive ethology in the answer, Mark. Can you give us a very kind of quick definition of what that is?
Yeah, I mean, I think of cognitive ethology as the study of, I say animal minds, but non-human animal minds, and what's in them and how they're working, and following a lot of the work of Donald Griffin. So a lot of people don't know of him, but back in the 70s, he's an award-winning scientist. He discovered echolocation in bats as an undergraduate at Harvard University, and he did a lot of work on bat echolocation and sonar. And he wrote a book called The Question of Animal Awareness. And I was at meetings where people thought he was senile. I mean, it wasn't even funny, but here he is, an award-winning, member of the National Academy of Science, a hardcore experimental biologist writing about animal awareness and animal consciousness. So I look at him as, quote, the father of cognitive ethology. But that's what it is. It's trying to understand what makes non-human animals tick, what they're thinking and what they're feeling. And my extension of it is following Jeremy Bentham, just simply saying, how smart they are doesn't matter. It's what they're feeling. Can they, it's not, you know, he said something, it's not can they talk, can they reason, but can they suffer? And that's the bottom line. So that's what cognitive ethology is to me. And then with a very strong practical side, we need to use what we know. We're not being anthropomorphic. We're not making up data. We're not creating data sets. We're just showing you what we know. And a lot of people don't like that, of course, because it means that they need to think about the harm and killing and abuse that they bring forth voluntarily. No one has to. And they do it because they do it. And I don't tend to do things I don't like. So I assume a lot of them, I don't want to say necessarily they like it, but they surely don't mind it, or else they'd be looking for another job.
Yeah.
Mark, it seems
Can we just address this one? We've got a question. What do you think is the normal but inaccurate view that people hold about animals? Do you think that people take Rousseau's view that they are machines? I don't know if that means Descartes, I'm not sure. Or that animals are pure Freudian id or other?
I think a lot of people who it's a really great question. Even among my colleagues in science, it's really changed that very few, if any, really think of animals as being reflexive, unconscious machines. I mean, you know, to me, the proof in the pudding, as you would put it, is that they're constantly trying to create what they consider to be more stringent welfare standards, and we can talk about that later. So they know they're causing suffering. If they didn't think they were causing suffering, or the animals didn't care what happened to themselves, their friends, and their families, then they would say, the hell with it. I'm not going to create any more restrictions. I'm just going to do whatever I want to do. So I think that a lot of it is just very practical. I mean, I've had people say, I don't want to read the welfare standards. I don't want to read the Welfare Act because it's going to put right in my face the horrific things that I'm doing to other animals. I mean, I've written about a friend of mine. He's still a really good friend of mine. And I don't think he believes this anymore. But he used to say, I know they suffer, but I love my hamburger. And recently I posted something about people who study fishes, for example, and then go ahead and kill them and eat them. And I was reading a book just this past weekend about the beautiful sea. The animals are in it, the cognitive and emotional life of marine life, fishes. And the last chapter starts, well, naturally, I eat fishes. So I try to be as careful as I can about causing harm. And I just threw the book in the air. I just said, look, you know, you can do whatever you want. But really, after extolling the cognitive, the emotional lives of these animals, you go, naturally, I eat fishes. And I'm thinking, what's natural about it? You know, you're not a predatory fish. As far as I know, she's a human being.
Well, we established that books are not sentient anyway, Mark, so that's good.
Yeah.
So for those humans that realize that other animals have feelings and that they are individuals, there is a dilemma after realizing that. What comes first, the individual or the species, if we have to choose?
Yeah. Well, in our book, The Animal's Agenda, Jessica and I developed what we called the science of animal well-being to counter the science of animal welfare. Animal welfare, does it help other animals? Well, surely it does. Does it help them enough? No, because a welfarist typically would calculate the costs and the benefits of doing something to other animals. And if the benefits to humans outweigh the costs to the animals, and this is all a human calculus, then it's okay to do something. So people get upset when I go, animal welfare is responsible for killing and harming and making billions of animals a year suffer. It does. It still, and when I say, but it's still better than nothing, a lot of people say, no, it's not. I do think it is. But in conservation, this field of compassionate conservation and the science of animal well-being focus on the lives of each and every individual animal. So each and every individual animal deserves a good life because they're alive. They have intrinsic or inherent value, not because of what we call their instrumental value of what they can do for us. So the science of animal well-being has extremely narrow margins for what we're allowed to do to other animals, as does the field of compassionate conservation. And the first tenet of compassionate conservation is first, do no harm, and the second is the lives of all individuals count. So conservation biologists play what I call the numbers game. It's okay to kill 1,000 brown rats on an island because there's 10,000 more of them. And I always say, well, if you told me it was okay to harm and kill me because there's a lot of other human beings like you, I would say, no, thank you. I don't think that's a good idea. Compassionate conservation in its true pure form, as well as the science of animal well-being, does not play the numbers game. It doesn't say it's okay to kill rats in a lab because there's 1 million more like them who humans are creating. So it's a really good question. For me, killing's off the table. It's off the menu. We need to move on. Simple.
We don't kill. Do we get to interfere? I mean, if individuals are in danger because of extreme weather conditions, unusual weather conditions, for example, or they are injured, or they suffer from a disease, should we interfere in the wild, I mean?
I think we should interfere when we've caused the harm. I mean, one of the most painful things about doing field work is watching, for example, coyotes or wolves injure themselves, not because of us, and not wanting to provide veterinary care. But once we step into their lives, we're part of their lives. I mean, we're part of them anyway. So, no, we don't interfere. I mean, in times of famine, I could go to the local food store and buy food for the animals. But the minute you step in, you are part of their lives, and they become dependent on you. But on the other hand, if you put electrical lines out and birds fly into them, or if we're driving a car and we injure an animal, or because of something we do to them causes this injury, pain, suffering, and death, I feel we are obliged. And sometimes it can be a fuzzy line, but usually we know when we've interfered. But I'm sorry, I when I say that, it sometimes brings tears to my eyes because you see, quote, horrible things out there. You watch a wolf kill an elk, or you watch coyotes or other animals kill rodents, but that's how they make their living. And by us interfering in their lives, we might be making their lives better for the moment, but we're not really doing them any favors.
I've seen a couple of times where this has happened, where a dog, who's let off the lead from the caregiver, and they've obviously having a lovely time out running in the field or in a park, and their act of running is actually disturbing some of the birds. Mm-hmm. So I saw, this was a few months ago, but I saw someone walking, they were on their phone, they were farther away from the dog, and the dog was running to try and catch a magpie. Mm-hmm. And my heart was in my mouth because the magpie had to hop. They have to hop before they take flight. And it was very close before the dog grabbed the magpie. Yeah. And I thought, really my first instinct was the caregiver should be more vigilant in monitoring the situation. Yep. But it happened very quickly. And this can happen sometimes, I suppose, can't it, when the two...
But the magpie got away, Tom. Is that right?
Magpie got away. Yeah.
Well, that program IQ. They were saying about you often get a situation where it looks like birds will wait until the last second before they, for example, fly off from the front of a car. And they were saying that's because they've got really good eyesight and they've got great abilities and almost like confidence in it. And so they're not as much danger as we think that they are.
That's true.
Yeah, so that's interesting.
Well, oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, that might be true. I mean, in the real world, I mean, as I'm a field ecologist, is a lot of animals might wait till the last moment to take flight because they don't want to give away their location or allow, say, a predator to follow them. So they do this instantaneous explosion, and it's called the confusion effect, for example. They sometimes confuse a predator or a group of predators. But I think the example of the dog is a good one. I spend a lot of time at dog parks, and I spent a lot of time watching free-range dogs. And I was at a dog park some years ago, and a woman was with her dog, and of course she was on her phone, drinking her Starbucks coffee and doing all the things people do. And her dog was chasing prairie dogs and causing a disruption to the colony. So I was going to say something, but I kind of got the vibes from this woman that she didn't want to hear it. But one of my field assistants named Elisa went over and said, "Oh, did you know that your dog is doing this?" And the woman said, "Oh, yeah, but they're just prairie dogs." And what she said to her was, "Well, how would you like it if I unleashed a pack of wolves to chase you?" And that was a conversation starter, to say the least. But I think the question about interference is a good one. If they had gotten the prairie dog, I think I would have felt obliged to try to treat the prairie dog. Would I feel the same if it were a coyote or, say, a fox? No. But once again, maybe there would be nothing I could do to that individual prairie dog, but the harm was caused by a human who should have been watching her dog. I mean, very simple. So, there's these rules or guidelines. I mean, my goodness gracious. But I do remember, more than one instance where coyote is not a good predator and they cause pain and suffering to a squirrel or another rodent. You see them running and sprain an ankle or break a leg. There was one who, I don't know what happened, but it was a female, had a broken rear leg, and she was in pain and hobbling. She survived for a really long time afterwards. But, and all my students, well, not all, but many of them were saying, we've got to get a vet out here. And I said, but, it's kind of natural that animals harm themselves that way. And once again, if we call a vet and we treat her and we put her back out, the vet would have had to take her in and set her leg. We've disrupted their long-lived social organization, and we're not going to be around. We're not going to be around as a member of that pack of coyotes. Yeah.
So we've got a few things in the comments to deal with. First of all, somebody likes this particular quote of yours, Cheryl. Although other animals may be different from us, that does not make them less than us. That's from Animals Matter. Mm-hmm. And then in relation to what you've just said, I think, and going back a little bit, got this from I.C. Turner. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. This one. This one here. Do you also disagree with intervening for humans who are starving? I'm not quite sure where that fits, but
I think I know where it fits, and I think it's it's a really hard no. I mean, a lot of starving humans are starving because of totally non-egalitarian society out there. I've been teaching these courses on animal behavior and conservation biology, now compassionate conservation, in the local jail. And, people go, oh, it's just a country club. They don't really need it. It's not. I mean, I treat murderers and rapists and child abusers, as well as pickpockets and people who get arrested or used to get arrested for having, a small amount of marijuana in their pockets. I think we should help starving humans. And I would apply that to also starving domestic animals, mainly because, as I said before, as a field biologist, if I go out and do something in the wild, I'm interfering in an ongoing dynamic social structure, social organization, and I can't do all of it. So what I would like to believe is that there's enough goodwill, big-hearted people on Earth who will try to interfere, I don't know if it's interfere, who will try to feed starving humans. Then somebody might say to me, and I've heard people say this, well, they're just lazy, they don't work. You know, I'd like to believe that most of them are not lazy and would work, would take care of themselves if they could. I can't use the lowest denominator not to care for starving humans. And a lot of the homeless, or a number of homeless in Boulder, were students in my class. A lot of them suffer from psychological disorders. And most, if not all of them, would rather not be homeless and on the streets. So I buy them coffee and I buy them food to eat. And during the pandemic, I bought them paper towels and toilet paper because I need it. I mean, what am I supposed to do? And yeah.
Well, here's a question about academia. Do you see, this is from Deb, do you see progression towards animal rights in academia as a whole, or have we reached a stalemate at this point in time, which is interesting?
I think that's a great question because it gets back to the use of animals. For example, it gets back to the use of animals in research. So when I tell some of my colleagues, not here in Colorado necessarily, oh, did you know the Animal Welfare Act considers rats, does not consider rats, mice, and other animals to be animals? And they'll go, oh, yeah, but, and I'll go, no, I don't know. What do you mean, but you know? And really what it comes down to is, once again, it allows them to do whatever they want to these fully sentient, conscious beings. I think in some circles, and it's a really good question, I'm seeing this movement, if you will, to the left about more concern about animal protection. When I talk to my colleagues and a lot of people, I use the phrase animal protection, just like I use the phrase animal well-being rather than animal welfare, because the phrase animal rights turns people off. And so I usually talk about more and closer control, if you will, standards for animal well-being so that we protect the other animals. So in some places, yes. In some places, no. But I certainly don't see it across the board in the United States or other countries in terms of a move towards more animal rights, if you will, in classrooms and laboratories in universities.
Well, we're quite committed to the phrase animal rights, given the name of the show, Mark.
Sure.
But,
yes, unfortunate.
We just got one more, Wendy, sorry, but one thing about animal welfare, which is quite interesting in terms of legislation, is it's illegal to terrorize other animals. Again, pointing out the fact that they know that other animals can be terrorized, and yet at the same time they want to then diminish who they are. But here's a question from about Australia here. What sorts of actions do you think we are able to take for problems caused by humans that involve other animals, e.g. introducing domesticated cats to Australia, destroying native flightless birds? So if you look at around the globe, we've got other animals being, non-indigenous other animals being introduced all over the place, and all the trouble that that's caused.
Well, I've written a lot about what's happening in New Zealand in their war on wildlife. That's reprehensible and egregious, and what other word? And you can use whatever other words as synonyms. The cat situation. I mean, I understand it's a difficult one. I know some of the details, but I'm also working with people in Australia who really are against this wanton killing of cats. I mean, once again, a lot of it comes right back to human responsibility. Stop breeding cats. People can become better guardians of their, companion cats. I frankly am skeptical about the billions of animals a year that cats kill. I mean, I'm not the only one. I mean, there are people who favor controlling cats who still wonder where that, the number came up with. I'd like to believe that over time there would be more, if you will, control on these cats' lives so that they don't, they're not allowed to roam freely. I just think a lot of it comes back to human responsibility. And the New Zealand situation is, this native versus non-native designation. A lot of the animals in New Zealand who are being killed, they're killed in school killing contests. They're killed by hunters. They're killed by, families going out on a hunting and let's kill the rodents or the invasive possums, around here. I have been there for a really long time. And so the thought that by killing them, you're going to return to what was is a false biological, ecological idea. I mean, ecosystems are dynamic, growing, ongoing entities, number one. And number two, there's a lot of people on the ground in New Zealand and in Australia who don't believe in numbers. So are they causing some pain, suffering, and death? I'm sure they are. But they're there because of humans. So I think that if you just allow this wanton killing to go on, then most humans are going to just take the attitude, maybe if they're not even conscious of it, of what the hell if the animal becomes a problem, they'll just kill it. So it removes personal and individual responsibility for the well-being of these animals.
Well, we've got a couple more questions in the chat, but you've got one, Wendy, first, is it?
Yeah, I'm really curious about something, actually, Mark, and it comes down to the whole kind of research that you do on other animals, and it seems to me, this is how I see it, obviously it's just my opinion, but it seems to me that we're always trying to catch up with the science. Mm-hmm. with what we know instinctively as children. Children instinctively know that other animals are emotional beings, that they're sentient, that they have these relationships, and then that is obviously socialized out of us. But it always feels like the science is always just catching up. But it feels as well like the burden of proof falls onto us as allies and advocates, but falls to the other animals to prove their intelligence, to prove how sentient they are, to prove the ways in which they're similar to humans, how aesthetically pleasing they are, how endangered they are. And yet, so we find ourselves having to prove this. And yet, wouldn't it be amazing if the burden of proof were on the other side? Like, prove to me that they're not sentient, prove to me that they don't have emotions and relationships. And it feels like but drawing parallels seems to be the only way that we have as advocates to foster this empathy in humans for other animals.
Yeah.
But it seems like even no matter what we discover, it makes no difference. It doesn't change anything. No matter what we discover about these incredible individuals, it doesn't change. People are still speciesist and still anthropocentric and human supremacist. What is it going to take, Mark? I'd really love to have some kind of positive answer.
That's an easy question, Wendy. Go on, Mark. Answer that.
When we're done,
no pressure, Mark. No pressure.
When we're done, just send me an email because I'd like to talk more about this because I'm writing about it and I've written about it. I mean, when people go show me the data, where's the proof? I always go, well, we've got it and we've had it for decades. So that's why Jessica and I, from a little more of a scholarly point of view, but really when you boil it down to just vernacular, we developed we came up with the idea of the knowledge translation gap, which means we need to use what we know on behalf of other animals. And there is this knowledge translation gap. And you're right. I have so many people write to me who effectively say something like, well, science is just catching up with what we all know. And on the one hand, that's true, but on the other hand, it's not. I mean, if you look back to 1965, the 5 freedoms, that's 55 years ago. The 5 freedoms came out, no matter how weak they were, they came out because people knew we were harming and killing and making all these food animals in the UK suffer. So there's nothing new there. But once again, I think it gets back to the fact that some people will say, well, we really don't know whether cows on a factory farm suffer, or when we castrate or cut the tails off of piglets without anesthetic that they suffer. Maybe their whining is like the ticking of a clock, or you know what I mean, the old Descartes stupidity. But there's enough science today, and there has been for decades, to mandate that we stop harming, killing them. Okay, and I think, yeah, I mean, I never know where to go with it, because if you look at the scientific literature on animal sentience, there's just been innumerable research projects on it over the years, and the burden of proof thing I love is, well, we don't know that dogs don't like to play, or cows being, mauled or being tortured on a factory farm, are really suffering. And I would say, well, how do you know that they don't? And one of the welfare examples is like Temple Grandin's work. People hold her up as the icon, and I always like to be fair to her. Has she made the lives of a few cows better? Yeah, she has. But better doesn't mean it's good enough. That's why I always say, why good animal welfare isn't good enough. I mean, I can make your life better by only hitting you over the head 20 times instead of 100 times, but that still isn't good enough. So
I thought grandin was all about making the deaths better, not the lives better.
Yes, and that's, of course, another way to look at it. And it's making their deaths better because she's looking at them as they walk on what she calls her stairway to heaven, which is a stairway to hell. It's a stairway to the killing floor, ignoring, if you will, the fact that they're born in captivity, that they're raised in captivity, that their mothers are ripped away from them, and that during transport they suffer and a lot of them die. So you're right. But I'm using her as an example, as an icon to most people. Not many, but most people, because I've had people say, well, look at all she's doing, or I've had somebody write to me and say, well, look at what she's doing. You've done nothing for these animals. And I debate that, but still, that's where people are coming from. So I'll just say to them, well, show me that they don't suffer. Why should I have to show you that they suffer? The logic from an evolutionary point of view, that they're mammals, they suffer just like we do. I mean, there's cow suffering and, human suffering and mouse suffering, but they're still experiencing major compromises on their well-being. So you're right, Wendy. I mean, it just makes no sense at all.
We've got a change of tack a little bit here from Rama. What do you think about the arguments in the book Zoopolis?
Oh, well, I mean, I need to. Who wrote that book? How do they differ?
Donaldson and
Kimlicka.
Who's that?
Donaldson and Kimlicka.
Right.
Or Kimlicka.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure.
I need to know which arguments you mean more.
Well, is it do you differ from the recommendations in this book regarding domesticated animals, wild animals, and liminal animals? And so it's about the citizenship argument, and about yeah. Well,
I mean, we've just written a book that's coming out in October called "A Dog's World: Imagining the lives of dogs in a world without humans," and it's very pandemic related, although we started it years ago. I mean, I think we're obliged to take care of all individuals, wild and domestic. I mean, we've screwed up the lives of domestic animals for sure. Just look at pug-nosed dogs, and just look at all the animals on factory farms and animals who are raised on fur farms and dairy farms, and you all know about this. The citizenship argument, I think, is interesting, but sometimes it sounds fluffy to people. But I mean, think all animals are citizens in the world. They were here long before we were here, and they're going to be here probably a lot of them long after we're gone. So I don't know if I know enough about the details of the argument in Zoopolis, but I don't like to draw the line, if you will, between domesticated and non-domesticated animals on the one hand, but on the other hand, we brought these domesticated animals into the world to serve us, not to serve themselves. So I suppose we could have more and broader obligations to take care of them when things go wrong. But
are you aware of Nybert's idea of domestication rather than domestication, Mark?
I don't know that, but I'm going to write it down.
Yeah.
Who is this?
David Nybert. Yeah. And I've got another question as well. I'll put that in while you're writing that down.
No, go ahead.
So, Anna, there's been a debate amongst animal advocates that the difference in cognitive abilities among animal species should be reflected in the set of rights that they should enjoy. What do you think about this? Or think about it?
Sorry, I was right. That the differences in cognitive abilities among
so this is a kind of Steve Wise idea of the kind of hierarchy of cognitive abilities will then affect the set of rights that you enjoy. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know Steve Wise, and and the work he does is amazing. I don't know. I mean, I've always just been amazed by how persistent he is, and I mean persistent in a good way. Like I said before, maybe in certain animals there's this relationship between cognitive abilities and emotional abilities. So from a practical point of view, I think we need to start with the non-human primates. We could go to dogs, because we need to begin with animals with whom most humans are familiar, or who look like us or behave like us, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that's a good starting point. But if you remember years ago, there was Paula Cavallari and Peter Singer's ideas about the Great Ape Project, and I wrote a paper called the Great Ape Animal Project. I mean, we need to start somewhere, and maybe that's the best way. I think we'll probably make more headway if we start with dogs, and if we start with great apes and elephants and these charismatic megafauna than we will if we start with rats, mice, and fishes. But at some point, I think all these animals deserve protection. They all deserve personhood. They all deserve to be legally protected from harm.
What happens to... Oh, sorry, Roger, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was wondering, and actually I got a few messages last night from activists that told me to ask you this. What happens to animals that don't exist in the wild anymore? A specific example is the Greek donkey. The Greek donkey is an endangered animal. And now donkeys in Greece exist only in sanctuaries, a few number, or they are exploited as transportation. So obviously, as activists, we want to stop the exploitation and the oppression. But the argument of the other side is that if we stop breed them and sell them, then the species is gone, since donkeys do not exist in the Greek nature anymore. So how we proceed with species that are like that?
It sounds cold-hearted, but, natural evolutionary processes do result in some species going extinct. Now that we're part of the equation, it's become much more complex. So you could argue, well, yeah, you can breed them, but you're not allowed to use them. But they have to live normal lives, So zoos like to do that. Well, we're breeding these animals because there's few or none in the wild, and they're going to live the rest of their lives in cages. We're not going to try to reintroduce them. And that's just whack. I mean, that's just ridiculous. They're not going to try to reintroduce them at all. So, yeah, I mean, I suppose one could come up with an argument that says, yeah, we're going to continue to breed these animals, but we're not going to use them. In other words, we're going to keep the species alive, but we're going to have these donkeys, and we're going to appreciate them for who they are, not what they could do for us. But, in the real world, whatever that is. I mean, I never knew what the real world was, and in the last year, it's just gone it's out of my realm of thinking about what reality is. But species do go extinct, and it's a very sad event. But I do think for people who want to keep breeding these animals, then that's fine, but you're breeding them to keep them alive, not to serve you. I know this is kind of off the cuff answer, but that's kind of my general take on it.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Marc, you talk about rewilding. I love this concept of rewilding. I wonder, do you feel that is it in our nature to come from such a self-serving place and have such oppressive behaviors that seem to be, like we were talking about before, the burden of proof? It seems to be our stance that let's assume the worst and we'll give little bits away when we have to, rather than coming from a place of compassion and respect for all animal life, including ourselves, and coming from that place. Do you think that's in our nature? And do you think that this rewilding concept that you talk about helps us to get back to maybe more of what is probably our more natural, compassionate, respectful selves?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question and a great way to put it. Yeah, I do. I mean, I think that, there's all this work in conservation psychology, Richard Love's work and others who, the nature deficit syndrome. I mean, regardless what you call it, how people have become really alienated from nature and alienated from other people, including other people and themselves, and how this pandemic has really brought that to the fore, that just getting out and getting outside. I mean, all of Peter Wohleben's work on the emotional lives of trees, if you will, and, the connections we have to plants and, non-animal entities and non-animal beings, if you will. So I do think that the angst a lot of people feel is because it's who we are, evolutionarily. And, people like to romanticize the past. I mean, early humans harmed and killed other animals. Native Americans do, but there's just this different side to the story in terms of coexistence and respect, respect for the animals and the dignity to which these animals are, or the dignified, I'm not sure how to say it, how they're viewed with dignity. So there's no doubt about it that the past wasn't as romantic as people make it. But I do think that the angst people are feeling these days comes from inherently feeling that we need to have more contact with non-human animal and non-animal nature. I do. And I think I'd like to believe that it's really driving people into not only getting out and doing more in nature, whether it's with flora or fauna or both, but also coming out of it to respect other animals.
That's the one thing I was going to say, Marc, that I really valued about your work and the research that I've done. Watched a number of YouTube videos, which Wendy kindly shared. Excuse me, and you talk about the empowering this kind of individual agency of other animals, and you talk a lot about your observation of other animals. And I know you've done a lot of work with dogs and canines and coyotes, like you've spoken about. But it's just something that I've tried to become more mindful of. I mean, on my run today, I went on a trail run, and I was approaching a path, and there was a caregiver with a dog, and the caregiver looked embarrassed because I was running on that path, and they started trying to pull the dog. The dog was sniffing on the ground, and they looked quite engrossed. And I just said, I'll run around. You can leave, you can allow them to enjoy that. But I know that that's something that you're a big proponent of, and trying to enhance. What we can do as animal advocates is in individuals who are in those environments, how we can empower them and enhance their lives through it, allowing them to be free in ways that they want to be free and explore that themselves.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example. I mean, dogs need to use their sniffers, and when dogs are allowed to sniff, they'll sniff a third of the time when they're free to sniff. But yeah, I mean, I have that happen a lot when I'm riding my bike, going down the bike path, and people will be pulling their dogs, and I'll just stop, you know? Yeah. Or if I see dogs running ahead of me, I stop. No big deal. I mean, these dogs are having a ball sniffing and playing one another. And I do say to the people, it's okay. You know, this is, I don't know how much time these dogs get out, but clearly they're having fun. And I don't want to be the blame for them not having fun and being able to express their dogness. And that can be part of rewilding, just like all these animals, you know, I call them new neighbors, coming into towns where they weren't, they hadn't been in a long time, if ever. A lot of them, like around Boulder, are reclaiming their homes. When bears and cougars and red foxes come into the streets of Boulder, I think people should cherish their presence, not try to get rid of them. I understand cougars and black bears are dangerous, so I just have to change my ways, but they're happy, they're coming home, they have more freedom. I think that's part of, you know, the notion of rewilding. But I really do feel that somewhere buried in the genome of all humans is this drive to connect with other nature, if you will. And it's shutting it off that really is causing major psychological problems among people, you know, and, you know, people will say, what about these animal abusers? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is in them, you know, that in the best of all possible worlds, they would want to connect positively with other animals, and, you know, including human animals. So there are these studies that show, you know, to some degree, I'm not quite sure how to evaluate some because I'm not a psychologist, but that the natural tendency is for people to care and respect the lives of other beings. But like Wendy said, I mean, you know, it's just educated right out of us. I loved years ago, and I still see it around here on the bike path, when I saw these little kids picking up these insects and putting them in a box. And I said, stopped on my bike, I said, what are you doing? And the teacher was great. I mean, she didn't know what I did or that I even cared. And she said, well, they're sampling the local insect population, and they have to put them back exactly where they found them. And, you know, some people would say, well, they shouldn't be doing it. Yes, I agree, maybe in the best of all possible worlds. But what I loved was this little girl who was just talking about how this is what she wanted to do forever. She wanted to protect other animals from humans. And at 6 or 7 years old, she knew that what they were doing wasn't maybe the best thing, but that's what they were doing. And I look at that as a very profound rewilding experience. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and when I was a kid, I would talk to the cats and the dogs and the birds and the ants and the goldfish my parents had on their kitchen counter. They never stopped me from doing it. I mean, people thought it was bizarre, but I really mean that was just my expression of something inherent to me, that I always wanted to know what these animals were thinking and feeling. And so, at 3 years old, I knew nothing about cognitive ethology or Charles Darwin, and probably could have cared less. But I realized that these animals had a life, and that's what my folks told me. So I'm not alone in this. It's just my parents supported this, while other parents might have said, oh, God, this guy's a whack job. We need to get him psychotherapy immediately. He talks to goldfish. I mean, what a bizarre behavior. So, yeah.
I still talk to them all, Mark. Do you?
Oh, yeah.
I talk to trees. I
talk to trees.
I walk.
I forgot about someone else who talks to trees.
I wrote this article.
So does Clint Eastwood.
Well,
yeah.
I mean,
but they don't listen, right, Roger?
I mean, years ago, I wrote this article just recently about Peter Wohler-Leben's new book about, you know, the lives of trees. And years ago, when I lived in the mountains, I'd take a walk, and I met this guy who called himself the elf. And I'd say, what are you doing? And he'd say, oh, I'm talking to the tree, and I'm hugging the tree and all that. And at the time, I was thinking, well, okay, I mean, that's fine if you want to hug it. But this is, you know, some years later, somehow the elf knew what was going on, that it was good for him and good for the tree. I always tell people, do whatever you want to do in connecting with nature, other nature, flora and fauna, as long as it doesn't harm them. I love seeing people talking to the birds. I talk to the birds out here all the time. And do they like it? I don't know. Does it harm them? I don't think so. We have Mabel and Harry, a pair of finches, who come back, give or take the same day every March, and build a nest in the garage. They like it here, and the neighbors like it here. And when I go out, I teach them about animal behavior. When I go to dog parks, I teach people about dog behavior if they're interested. So I mean, your question is that's why I wrote Rewilding Our Hearts, but it comes from within. There's something in us all that in the best of all possible worlds, I think, in the best of all possible worlds, we wouldn't have the world we have right now in terms of human-animal conflict or human.
You know, Mark, I just think you're an old hippie. It's given away by the ponytail, which is always a bad sign. I mean, men with ponytails.
I take
Don't worry, Marky calls me an old hippie as well.
Good for you. I take that as a positive. Recently, I've connected with Joan Baez, the singer, and she also has a big heart for animals. And I actually think that she really likes my work on animal emotions, and she's a great artist and has wonderful stories about the animals she's rescued, et cetera, et cetera. But I always think she was born in Staten Island. She's a bit older than me. I was born in Brooklyn, New York. And I think one of those connections is that we're kind of, I don't like to use the word old, aged. We're just hippies. but I really mean it, that we've been thinking about issues of social justice for a really long time. And I think the time has come where we need to exploit those ideas and make them grow. I really do.
When you've been out there studying other species, has there been any moment that after spending a lot of time with them, coyotes maybe, that you have felt with an absolute certainty what they feel, like if the barrier between you, the human, and the non-human has vanished, and you know how they experience world, even if you cannot prove it? Are there moments like that? When
you think say that again, where there are no barriers?
When you're out there studying them and spending so much time with them, have you ever felt with an absolute certainty that at that moment you know what they feel or what they think or how they experience the world?
Yeah, I do. I always say that when I watch the penguins in Antarctica, I try to become penguin. And part of it, of course, is I know about their sensory systems. I know how they live in the world and et cetera, et cetera. But I'm sure a lot of my friends just get sick of me, especially on long bike rides, because they'll say, we'll see a squirrel or a prairie dog or a magpie, or we'll see coyotes and foxes out in the fields, outside of Boulder. And they'll say, oh, God, we're going to get another lecture on what it's like to be a prairie dog or a magpie. And I go, you're right. Yeah, I do. I mean, with the work I do with dogs, because those have been my recent books, yeah, I mean, I know about their sniffers. I know how their eyes and ears work. And I'm always trying to imagine what life is like for them from their perspective. I do the same thing with the inmates I teach. I mean, most of them, maybe not all, but most, if not all of them, do not like the lives they had. I try to figure out what it was that sent them in a certain path, how they see the world, how they sense the world, and how their brains work, or don't work in terms of the normal standards of society. So, yeah, I mean,
it's very, very, very Johnny Cash, that part of your life, isn't it, Mark? But we're a bit over time, folks. But there's one question that's come up twice, so maybe we could just address that for the final one. our opinion about synthetic meat.
Good thing for animals or bad? I mean, people ask me that all the time, and my honest opinion is I can't imagine it's a bad thing, but I don't eat it, and I don't mean that in a self-serving way. I just don't eat it, and so I'd like to believe it's a good thing in terms of reducing harm, suffering, and closing down factory farms and family farms where animals are quote killed humanely, whatever that means. So I'm not sure I can answer that question, but I'd like to believe it's a good thing.
Anybody else on the panel want to give that a go for the last minute or so?
I would say that for me, like initially I was not too sure about it, but I watched a discussion on Born Vegan's YouTube channel, Serena, the vegan, Born Vegan, and there were other vegans talking more about this issue. And I think for me, I guess there's obviously a lot of investment in the lab-grown meat sector, and the way it's promoted is that it will, obviously not involve animals being used. Currently, animals having their rights violated in this process. There's a lot to go, but the projection is that there will be less energy, carbon emissions being used for that. But I think that there might be some problems with that scientific research because it's based on renewable energy. So it's scaling up. Maybe the scaling up of that is not entirely accurate, and maybe it's somewhat misleading because we're not quite there with the renewable energy. So I think that's a bit of a concern there. And also getting the public to kind of buy into this whole thing, because I think there are numerous surveys which suggest that people aren't actually excited about this, non-vegans even. So I think that's problematic. But I guess for me, like I don't think it addresses the core issue that is speciesism. It's just I think it's
still true, Tom. Do you know? Do you still need to have bovine fetal serum?
Yeah, I think that's for the certainly for the cow lab-grown meat, right?
Yeah.
No, they're doing that, which is a very invasive process for the animals. Yeah. So
I would not say that it's morally acceptable to continue to oppress other animals, even fewer animals, so people could have meat, even if that's synthetic meat. But I see that maybe a use in the future in a vegan world for feeding synthetic meat to carnivores when these carnivores are injured or are not in the wild anyway, and we have to provide for them. And we have to provide meat. So maybe it would be better to provide synthetic meat than other animals.
As well.
Somebody asked me that, and of course you could, it's a horrible situation. You can also provide roadkill, and that gets into, problems with cars.
Can we give our cells? I give my cells for that.
We just lay you out on top of a mountain when you die, Tom, don't we?
Sounds good to me. I'm looking at the mountain.
Can I go in the forest, please, for me?
Yeah.
Just lay me out in the woods.
I know we're over time, but I'd like to just say thank you for your interest in my work and thank you for this discussion. And maybe, Roger, you could send me the reference on domestication.
Yes, okay.
I don't know it. And Wendy, do, when you get time, I'd like to follow up on what we were talking about. I think it's really
What's the best way for people to engage with your work, then, Mark?
I think the best way is just go to my homepage, marcbekoff.com. It's one page. It's really simple. I don't even know if it has any links at the top, but I had to do it. And they were saying, well, do this and zoom this in. And I'm thinking, shit, I just all the information is there. And my email address is on the page too.
And you're big on Twitter as well. Not so much Facebook, yeah?
I'm not on Facebook. I always say that if dogs had Facebook, it would be called Buttbook. So I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on Instagram. Is it? No, Instagram. No. I tweet out. The reason I like doing it and the reason I like writing for Psychology Today is it gets to the non-converted. It really does. People have asked me why I would write for a magazine like Psychology Today, and it's a good platform for getting stuff out. it reaches people who never would engage in these sorts of discussions or topics. So that's why. But they just go to my homepage. Yeah.
I just want to say that one of your books, Wild Justice, is also available in audio for the people that cannot, or they don't like to read, or they are not able to read.
Well, that's everybody, isn't it?
Not everybody, but in some cases.
Are you asking if they are in audio?
There is. I'm sure that
No,
Wild Justice there
yeah.
is in audio format.
Oh yeah, no, there are audio. Yeah, there are out there. I mean, I haven't. It would be, I don't know about you all when you write, but if I had to read a book into a microphone, I would probably pull the book off the market. I really say those things. Not really.
You don't have to do it. You don't have to do it yourself, Mark. You get a voice actor to do it.
Yeah, no, I know, and the publishers are, and you know, there's just lots of ways you can access stuff. Oh, there you go.
Mark, this is Brian. He's usually quite a regular on the show, but he's been a little bit of a diva lately. He wants a pay increase, so I think he's going on strike a little bit.
He was a bit intimidated by your reputation, Mark, because he's not written as many books as you. That's what it is.
Oh, but he knows that. He knows I'm against killing cats, pretty much. So yeah. Will you send me a link to this so I can post it?
This yes, indeed we will, and I'll send you the domestication thing.
Yes.
And I want to thank everybody for the brilliant chat that's been going on whilst we've been going. Sorry if we missed any questions. I think there was a couple that I might have missed, so sorry about that.
We could have done with 3 hours. We could have done with 3 hours really to get through.
Yeah.
The other thing is I have this Google group that I call Animal Cognition, Animal Emotions, and Compassionate Conservation. And if they send me an email, I can add them to it. I send out a lot of stuff. I mean, and some people get upset, but that's what the delete button's for. But I have people from all over the world sending me information, you know, from local media and books I don't know about, languages that I don't speak or some I haven't heard about. I really mean it. So they can just email me and just ask me to be added to the Google group, and I will. It's an amazing resource. It takes a lot of my time, and frankly, sometimes I regret that I started it because I'll wake up to 50 emails about those things. But it's actually become a really important source, and it's been really important for me in my own work. So I'm more than happy to add people, and we just never have to stop working. I mean, I was thinking about it this morning that you just can't give up. I mean, I know that I shouldn't be saying it so prescriptively, but you just got to keep putting the good message out there. You just really do, and being nice to people with whom you disagree, and just keep putting it out there.
Just give us a minute, folks.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, Mark, actually, because you've got you know your 12 Ps for rewilding. I know you started with 8, and then it went to 10, and then it went to 12. I might have a little suggestion for number 13, and 13 is supposed to be a really positive number in nature, I believe.
Okay, what is it?
Polite.
Oh, it's in there.
I don't think it was in there.
Oh, okay. Well, I think it is, but I'm going to put Wendy.
Because I know that really fits with how you advocate for us to advocate to others is always be respectful and polite to others, not getting in people's faces.
We're not leaving until I look this up.
Okay.
This is what Cheryl said. Roger, will you post the domestication? So it's animal oppression, human violence, domestication, capitalism, and global conflict. By David Nybert.
Can you email me it?
What, the entire book?
No, just I'm looking up.
I write them down. Do you want me to read them out to you?
Proactive, positive, persistent, patient, peaceful, practical. You're right. Thank you, Wendy.
Can I have that number 13? Oh, my day. I can die happy now.
Okay, I wrote it down because I write everything down. So Wendy, when you send me an email about the burden of proof, send me, I'll have your full contact, your full name, and I will add number 13 as soon as I can. Thank you.
And I mean, this has been a great session, and I'm sure it could have been double the length. So if you ask us nicely, Mark, we'll have you back in a few weeks if you want to come back.
Yeah, so, no, I'd love to. This is. I mean, I like talking to the non-converted, but I really like talking to the converted. And I would love at some point, because when it comes out, this new book on imagining the lives of dogs in a world without humans, I wrote it with Jessica Pierce, with whom I wrote Wild Justice and a lot of other The Animal's Agenda. It raises a lot of the questions we're talking about right now on human-animal relationships, human-dog relationships, who we are, the process of now domestication, and stuff like that. So I'd love to talk to you about it, because it's got 3 chapters that you might, I mean, it's written for a popular audience, so people won't get bored and just toss it. And Jessica is really good about doing those sorts of things. But it raises a lot of the questions we're talking about right now. We could do that. But yeah, this is great for me.
When is the book coming out?
It'll be out in October. It just actually appeared on Amazon and Princeton University website called Dogs Gone Wild by Jessica Pierce and me.
I'll have a comment by Dr. Christophe Dond.
And we've already got an Italian publisher apparently who's going to bring it out the same day as it comes out in English, which is really good. So.
Yeah, so just reading. Can you put that comment back up, Roger, just so Mark can see it, because I don't think he saw it from Christoph. So Mark, you're doing a tremendous service to the movement with your Psych Today blog and books, and I'd like to second that, please.
Oh, really? We all need a pat on our back, and today's a good day for a pat in the back, because I can't go out on a 4-hour bike ride because it's snowing and I have things to do. But no, this is great. I'm really touched by your interest in my work. We all want to feel like we're making the difference, and we are. But it's nice to have these. Like I said, it's nice to have friendly discussions. I'm pretty good at applying now what it has just evolved into the 13 P's due to Wendy, but applying it to the way I deal with people. And at some point, I just said, hell, that I just can't get bogged down arguing with people. So fine, you have your views. I got to move on. There's enough people out there who really are open to change. So thank you.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Mark.
We're gonna have to go. So panel, you stay where you are, and I'll play the titles. And thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. And we've got a great guest panelist next week, haven't we, Nella?
Oh yes, we do. Should I say or should I?
Should we say or should we go? Yeah, go on.
Mark, you can stay with us as well if you don't mind when we go off live. Because
next week our guest is Patrice Jones.
Yay! That's gonna be another goodie. This has been a goodie, and so thanks everybody, and we'll see you again.
Great, thank you.
Here we go.
thanks everyone. Bye. Take care.
Yeah.